885. My name is Sean Canan. I'm the host of Midpoint Monday on 88.5 FM WMNF Tampa and WMNF.org. It's 12:33 in the afternoon, and I'd like to welcome in my guest. Thanks so much for joining us. In the studio is, for the rest of the hour, we're going to talk about the FCC's vote and what's next. Laila Abdelaziz is with Fight for the Future. It's a group working to save net neutrality. On its website, Fight for the Future is described as a nonprofit working to expand the Internet's power for good. So welcome back to WMNF's Midpoint, Laila.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for coming in. And I'm also going to do full disclosure. You're also a member of the WMNF Board of Directors.
I am.
So thanks for coming in, and thanks for your service, as they say, right? So let's begin with laying out, we've heard a little bit about what neutrality is, what net neutrality is, but maybe you can say your point about why you've been fighting to save net neutrality.
Absolutely. I mean, the internet, the digital world is by far the way that the global community connects. It's the way we innovate. It's the way small businesses have been able to survive this economy. It's so much of real life is happening digitally right now. And net neutrality is largely the set of protections that protect all of us at a consumer level or at a civic level or at a connecting digitally level from powerful internet providers like AT&T and Verizon. It prevents them from being the gatekeepers of the internet, essentially, and it gives people the power to control what they can see and do online rather than corporations.
But we just heard from Ajit Pai. He gave this impassioned speech, or we heard 7 minutes of it, where he said things like, small startups and so forth are burdened by these regulations. The heavy-handed regulations is how he put it. Were the net neutrality rules heavy-handed regulations, or did they? It seems like the net didn't change that much once they went into place. It seemed like.
Well, net neutrality the internet has always had net neutrality. The internet has always been neutral. And what happened in 2015 was really a mass movement of people that had, been going on for decades prior to codify the strongest possible enforceable protections for how internet providers deliver us our internet. So what happened in 2015 was a victory for digital rights activists, for human rights activists, for the startup community, for small businesses. And despite what FCC Chairman Ajit Pai says, small businesses across the country and startups across the country were publicly lobbying against the FCC net neutrality repeal. They are the businesses that will be harmed by this because they'll have to be paying more to internet service providers, these powerful companies, to access the web in the same way that they do, to access the audiences that they need to access to continue doing their businesses. So, FCC Chairman Ajit Pai can say one thing, but the reality in the record says a completely different thing.
Our guest is Laila Abdelaziz. She's with Fight for the Future, and we heard, when we first heard the first commissioner, Jessica Rosenworcel, when she was saying that there were so many fraudulent comments sent in, whether they were from Russian email addresses or whether they were from people being impersonated. And then this morning on Twitter, I saw Senator Jeff Merkley writes that, turns out someone impersonated me during the FCC net neutrality comment period. It's further proof of forged comments in this process. We need to get to the bottom of this and demand justice for those who sought to be heard. And this person went in and put in Jeff Merkley's name and his city and zip code, and then wrote these saying things like, please repeal the net neutrality rules. So someone impersonated a U.S. senator.
Well, over 2 million Americans have been impersonated by this mysterious mass dump. We noticed this at Fight for the Future. We noticed this very early on, probably in the end of May or the beginning of June. We noticed that millions of Americans had their names, their addresses, and an anti-net neutrality comment posted on their behalf in the FCC net neutrality public comment docket. And we flagged this to attorney generals. Now, with the New York State Attorney General leading this battle, the FCC is getting sued because they went on with this proceeding despite so many state attorney generals, despite so many consumer protection agencies, despite so many nonprofits raising the alarm and saying that the FCC has not met it's the expectations that we would have as citizens towards the FCC to clear the docket of these fake comments and address the fact that fake comments are in, the people are their identity is being stolen on behalf of this process. So, you know, after the FCC's vote last week, there's a lot of things that will happen next. This is not the end for net neutrality. Net neutrality is not dead yet. We are pushing for a Congressional Review Act. Senator Markey of Massachusetts has already initiated the Congressional Review Act fight, and Representative Doyle will introduce the resolution in the House. But with a simple majority in the Senate and House, through the Congressional Review Act, we can overturn the FCC's Thursday decision, and that's what internet users are asking for. That's what startups are asking for. That's what small businesses are asking for. That's what civil rights defenders are asking for, is for a full repeal of the FCC's vote, because the FCC, according to our courts, according to legal precedent, is the authority that can prevent paid prioritization from internet service providers, is the authority that has the legal mandate to be able to enforce a neutral internet.
And that's the reason I wanted to do this show on the FCC's vote this week, not just because, you know, okay, something happened last week and we covered it on Thursday, of course, but I wanted to do today was going to be what's next. We know that the FCC voted to stop the net neutrality rule, but what's next? And so you're talking about these lawsuits by these attorney generals. Florida is not one of the Florida's attorney general is not joining the lawsuits. And you know, also Congress can do action. So that's definitely one of the things I wanted to focus on today. We're also going to take some calls from listeners and some emails. We already got some emails. Our guest is Laila Abdelaziz with Fight for the Future. You're listening to WMNF Tampa, 88.5 FM. And Meg writes, I'm currently listening to your program in Mexico. She's visiting for a month. She's listening on her computer. She also has a smartphone where she can do internet searches. Both of them use a local Mexican provider for services. How would net neutrality change affect other countries such as Mexico, etc.? What about when U.S. citizens are using internet while visiting? There are many U.S. citizens and permanent residents here who use Mexican providers. Would their searches be affected by this? And so that's St. Pete resident Meg asking how these repealed net neutrality rules will affect people who are traveling outside the U.S.
Absolutely. So if net neutrality is ultimately repealed, the implications would be felt internationally, of course. I mean, the United States, the internet and the issues and the way that we use the internet, you know, the United States is a leading factor in all of this. In many countries, including Mexico, for example, with their Mexico mobile plans, they don't have net neutrality, and you have a staggered pay-to-play internet experience in several countries around the world. So several people in the international community are already raising the flag and saying that this is how civil society, this is how democracy suffers when you have to pay to access the internet, or you have to pay to access certain parts of the internet that are currently free and open to everyone arriving at them in whatever way that they arrive at them. But especially, you know, people in other countries around the world where they're already facing the social, political, and economic consequences of not having a neutral internet are outraged at this decision because the United States is such a leading player in what the internet looks like around the world.
So we can get into things like commercial. For example, if you're an internet service provider and you're owned by Disney, let's say, you could make Disney movies stream fast, but competitors.
Yeah, I mean, for example, a very tangible example, I think, is that Verizon, which is one of the leading internet service providers for Americans across the country, owns Yahoo. And if you currently serve the web, you probably have a search engine that you prefer using, or a search engine that you configure to use over another because you like it better. But if you are a Verizon internet subscriber in a world without net neutrality, Verizon could force you to use only Yahoo and charge you to use other search engines. And this has, you know, several implications for people that prefer private search engines to secure their privacy, because Congress repealed our broadband privacy rights earlier this year. Or whatever it may be. I mean, just that choice will be challenged in a world without net neutrality.
So that's a commercial aspect of how it could change. But there's also, of course, political implications, as you were getting to, that, you know, it could be where certain thoughts, certain types of thought are slower to access, harder, more difficult to access, or more expensive to access.
Of course. I mean, I think that the 21st century has seen, and the internet and the digital world has given rise to authentic, individual, independent voices around the world, not just in the United States, but around the world. And this is possible because people have access to the entire internet when they put something online. If their ideas, if their intentions resonate with millions of people, they will reach millions of people regardless of whether they can pay to reach millions of people or not. And in a world without net neutrality, yeah, I mean, you're going to be throttled, you're going to be blocked, and all of these are not hypotheticals. There's a running list of internet service providers violating net neutrality. There's a running list of internet service providers trying to prioritize their services over other services, whether that's like video throttling or choosing, which services they natively give to people. But the implications are, the implications are universal to this net neutrality repeal.
Our guest is Laila Abdelaziz with Fight for the Future. Fight for the Future. We're going to go to the phone lines again, and we have Ricky in Tampa. Hi, Ricky. Very good.
Customers that had this service for a while, and I say this is what, and see that's what this repeal was. It allows them to do the type of charging like the young lady they want without any, without any recourse.
All right. So what I'm finding out about this internet infrastructure surcharge is that it's beginning with this bill. Customers not on an internet service term agreement, price protection, price protection plan, or subject to other exclusions will be assessed at $2 per month internet infrastructure surcharge. This is what Frontier says. So I think what they're doing, and they're hardly alone in implementing these fees. Other internet providers have done this. I'm reading from this website called fiercetelecom.com. And so I think what that has to do with is just an additional fee that they threw on there because you don't have a price protection plan. I will look more into that and try to put some information on the web, but I appreciate you letting us know about that. Laila, do you have any other experience with that?
Well, I think, net neutrality, if you watch the net neutrality debate from a public perspective, you didn't really see anyone in support of the repeal other than internet service providers such as Comcast, Verizon, AT&T. And a lot of this has to do, there are very real consumer implications to these major, powerful telecom companies having less regulations rather than more. These are the most powerful companies in the country. We as consumers don't have an option. We rarely have an option of who our internet service provider can be. So these are monopolies essentially existing in a market without regulations. And now these very strong, enforceable, and consumer protecting regulations are at threat because 3 commissioners at the Federal Communications Commission are more beholden to the cable companies than they are to consumers.
So this is going to a question that someone just asked on the internet. Kevin sends an email, says, "Great program. Could you speak to the former job the new FCC director had?"
Yeah, Ajit Pai used to be an attorney at Verizon, and I think that there is this history of revolving door, big cable, big telecom attorneys, then turning into FCC commissioners, then turning into FCC chairmen. And Ajit Pai follows that path, as many others before him did, and it's not, unfortunately, the exception that the regulators that our government appoints to regulate the industry often come from the industry itself.
All right, we're going to go back to the phone lines in just a second. I do want to read one more email out there, so we're going to go to Matt in Lake Alfred and Alan in Largo in just a moment. But 813 writes, Charles in Tampa writes, a typical conservative twisting references and facts away from reality to rationalize his own ideology and greed. And that's Charles referring to the speech we played from Ajit Pai, the FCC chair. And Rick writes, AT&T decided that iPhone users would not be able to use FaceTime calling when iOS 6 came out. They were sued based on net neutrality rules and enabled the app. So I guess this is Rick telling us one good experience that some consumers had with net neutrality. All right, so Matt in Lake Alfred, what's on your mind?
Well, I heard something very telling in Ajit Pai's speech earlier. He said something about blockchain technology and Bitcoin mining. Well, that to me let me know my suspicions were correct, that they're scared to death of people bit mining and having the potential to create digital currency basically from scratch in exchange for helping those networks be more secure. That's how I heard.
Careful.
But that was very telling to me, and I just would like to ask, knowing that, how do you explain to people that seem to be under the illusion that the internet worked just fine before net neutrality? So what's the big deal if we get rid of it? How do you respond to that kind of talk?
All right, thanks for that question, and I'm sure you get asked that a lot, Laila.
Yeah, I would point them to individuals such as Tim Berners-Lee, who is one of the founding leaders of the internet and the WWW, the World Wide Web, and many other individuals and innovators and creators that were around and definitive to the early days of the internet, that argue that the internet was built to be neutral, and the internet was developed with net neutrality in mind. And what happened in 2015 was a codification of these practices and a codification of these realities on the internet within an American legal framework, so that American consumer protectors and American legislators and American lawmakers and the U.S. government could protect consumers from ISPs that started to increasingly figure out how to violate net neutrality. What happened in the beginning of the 2000s was internet service providers were starting to prioritize applications or services or content over other content, and there became a massive consumer need to regulate and codify the rules of how these regulations would be enforced. So that was the 2015 FCC passage of net neutrality rules was a codification of the history of the internet. It wasn't the beginning of net neutrality.
813-239-9663. If you'd like to join this conversation, you're listening to Midpoint. It's 12:52 in the afternoon, and we have Alan in Largo on the line. Hi, Alan. Hi, what would you like to say?
Actually, I wanted to make two comments. One, I think Mr. Pai is neglecting to think back to where the internet actually started. It was actually started by the heavy hand of government with ARPANET. That's one point. The second point, I think that everybody kind of misses on, and I'm kind of shocked that businesses aren't more in tune with this. The biggest risk that I see is we've had a number of large companies and businesses move their things to the cloud. So Amazon to Amazon AWS, to Microsoft's Azure, to Oracle and their services, and to Google and their web services. What happens to those companies when they can't actually, perform their job functions, their business functions, because let's say Comcast signs an exclusive deal with with Oracle, and their stuff is on the AWS cloud, and now their information is throttled and they can't get to their data.
what happens then?
Well, I mean, I think that's why thousands of small businesses and startups have been rallying against the repeal of net neutrality. And there's many very real risks and threats, such as what the caller just brought up, that will happen in a world without net neutrality. And, this is why the fight turns to Congress now, and this is why it's important to educate people about the potential of this Congressional Review Act vote and the fact that we can, legislators know that 2018 is an election year, and by moving the fight to save net neutrality directly to Congress, we can draw the lines and force legislators to defend the small business entrepreneurs and innovators in the community, to defend democracy and to defend free speech at the district level by forcing a congressional vote on the issue.
Alan, anything to add? Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Alan. 813-239-9663 if you'd like to join the conversation. And I'm going to read an email and then go back to the phone in just a second. But I just remembered that when I went to Laila's website, the website for Fight for the Future, the website says this site has been blocked by your ISP. And it's a spoof, I guess, but it says Congress can pass a resolution of disapproval to overturn the FCC vote. You put that there to kind of make a point. Your company, your organization, your nonprofit put that there to make a point about what might happen in the post net neutrality future.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it's what many internet users around the world are already facing.
So if you're in Turkey or Syria or something like that, I mean, I'm just throwing out names of places.
Not sure if it's Turkey or Syria, Mexico, Portugal, the United Arab Emirates, New Zealand, many countries that don't have as strong as net neutrality protections as we did.
813-239-9663, and Josh writes, just noticed a coincidence. My Netflix account price increased by $2 a month. The notice came 2 days before the net neutrality vote and will be implemented on January 1st. He's asking, is this a coincidence, or is Netflix passing a possible price increase they may experience onto their customers?
I definitely would have to look into that, but this is another real-life consequence were net neutrality to officially be repealed. At the end of the day, the consumers, the everyday consumers, will have to pay the burden of these companies. I mean, whether it's Netflix or the local blog that you subscribe to, if these internet players have to now pay higher fees to internet providers to reach the audiences that they're currently reaching, that price is going to fall on the consumer.
All right, well, let's go to Max on the phone. Hi, Max.
I don't remember your guest's full name and where she works. I'd like.
My name is Laila, and I work at a digital rights nonprofit called Fight for the Future. We are one of many organizations that released the battleforthenet.com campaign, which is where millions of Americans have taken action to defend net neutrality.
Saying that cab companies can charge you more to go to Chili's than to go to Hooters. That idea. Because I think there's a lot of good people out there who would like to understand the subject, who can't exactly interact with it in the manner that you are able to. You're very sophisticated, and I appreciate that, but it's more than a lot of people can understand. I'd like to hear more.
Thanks, Max.
Absolutely. You should definitely check out battleforthenet.com because this is what you raise is a very real, I think, issue to understanding net neutrality. A lot of people think that they should have technical experience or they should understand very complicated ideas to understand net neutrality, but as simply put as possible, net neutrality is what protects our freedom of speech online. Net neutrality is what prevents internet providers from controlling what we see and do online. And I think that when we present the issue to many people, I mean, and that's why 83% of Americans, 83% of voters were outraged and opposed to the FCC's net neutrality repeal. When people actually hear what this issue is about, they understand that this is about preventing monopolies from getting even more power over all of us.
Net neutrality forbids internet service providers from messing with the content you want to check out on the internet, pretty much. Okay,
Yeah.
Cool. All right, well, thanks for that question, Max. We're going to try to squeeze in one more question from Holly in Sarasota. Hi, Holly. Sorry about that, Holly. We had your mic off. Can you start again, please?
Are you talking to me?
Yes, go ahead.
Hey, I'd like to respond to the caller about businesses and why they're not up in arms about this. There's got to be something we're missing here. There's got to be some sort of monetary advantage for them. And do you know what that would be? Because that's how I see it. It's really about money for the businesses, and I'm just curious as to what benefit they have.
Yeah, I would just respond by saying that small businesses are definitely speaking out in protection of net neutrality and against the net neutrality repeal. It's really just the major internet service providers that are in support of the repeal, which comes down to Verizon, AT&T, and Comcast.
And they'll be able to make more money, presumably.
They'll
Rip us off even more. Let me go out and say it. All right, well, thank you so much. Thanks to everyone who called. That's all the time we have, Laila. I wanted to thank you for joining us on WMNF's Midpoint today. Thanks so much,
Thanks
Laila.
for having me, Sean.
Laila Abdelaziz is with Fight for the Future. It's a group working to save net neutrality. I want to thank everyone who called, emailed, and texted today. And if you're still on hold or if you'd like to leave a voicemail with your thoughts, call me at 813-238-8001, extension 114. I'll play your message next year. You can also join the conversation online at WMNF.org/news or on Facebook or Twitter at WMNF News. I want to thank our engineer Alvaro Montealegre and our phone wrangler Frank Knox. I'm Sean Canay. I'm the host of WMNF News Midpoint Monday. Tomorrow at noon, your hero Mark Bureau will host Midpoint Tuesday. Stay tuned now for Craig Kopp and John Gilmore in executive session that's coming up after NPR headlines on WMNF Tampa, St. Petersburg, Sarasota. Thanks for listening.